Those eyes disguise our height. Bright lights decide the fight. Your heart beats fast despite the truth that I just wanna feel anything. Describe me. I'll hold you with you. I just wanna feel anything with you, with you.
Welcome to the Clean and Filthy podcast with your host, Matthew M.
Hello and welcome to the Clean and Filthy podcast, where we are clean and serene with the filthy mind in between. My name is Matthew M. I am your host and I am an addict in recovery. Welcome everybody to episode 33. We officially on that Scottie Pippen number, which is crazy to me. Creeping up towards that Sean Kemp number, which is also crazy to me. If you're not a fan of basketball, I'm sorry. I digress. Very, very happy to be here. We got a great episode for you today. We're going to be going over Chapter 9 out of the literature, Part 2, since there was too much to cover last week. We're going to be doing my weekly wrap-up with my favorite moment of the week and answering more of those questions submitted by our listeners and our viewers. So welcome, everybody. Oh, and of course, giving them a clean time shout-outs. Can't forget that. So welcome, everybody. Welcome to our new viewers. We've got some new people, some new listeners that I've been again hopping on Twitter hardcore, and we've been getting some new listeners from Europe. So welcome to my friends across the pond. Got some new people from South America. Welcome to my friends down south. Very, very glad you are here. Before we go anywhere, I got to give a huge thank you to Alice in Wonderland, Valentino Khan, and Mad Decent Records for allowing the Clean and Filthy podcast the privilege of using that incredible song, Anything, as our theme music. So thankful and grateful for that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Also, we don't currently have a sponsor for this podcast, but if you know of anybody or yourself are looking to sponsor either an episode or the whole podcast in general, or even just a segment, reach out to me directly. Always can get a hold of me at matthew@cleanandfilthypodcast.com, and I would love to discuss that with you further. Got to give a huge thank you first up to our VIP supporters. These are the people on Patreon that are helping this podcast grow and develop with donations. If you're interested in becoming a VIP supporter, head over to the website www.cleanandfilthypodcast.com. All of our social media information is in the top right corner. And along with all of that is the Patreon link. So once you have gone through Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube and you have liked, you have subscribed, you have tweeted, retweeted, and shared all that, head over to Patreon. Check us out. If you want to help support this podcast, make a donation there. And not only will you receive one of these amazing Clean and Filthy podcast stickers, which we have now decorated our microphone stand with, but you will also get a shout out on air. And they, just like these amazing people who are supporting this podcast with donations, and they are Alex B, Sage A, Cindy, Stephanie, Shar, Liana, Clint, and Alex T. Thank you all for your continued support and your continued belief in this product. I love it. I love it, love it, love it. Thank you so much. So if you are here right now, thank you for listening. If you are listening on a podcast directory, thank you for the download. I really hope you hear something you like. And if you do, please make sure to share it. please make sure to download our previous episodes. It really helps us grow. And, just thank you very much. But for those who don't know, we do this show every single week live on YouTube. We do a live stream. So if you're listening on a podcast directory and you want to be part of the live stream, head on over to the website. Make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube page so you will get a notification as soon as we go live, which just so happens to be 5 p.m. every single Tuesday, Arizona time. So head on over there. Much appreciated. Again, please throw a download. Please maybe throw a rating. Share this podcast. Helps us really grow. And if you're on YouTube right now, what up, yo? I know we got one viewer over there, my sponsee. What up, fam? Glad you're here. I love having this live element to it. So if you're in the live stream chat right now, get that chat popping. I love going back and rereading everything, all of the comments afterwards. It's a lot of fun. If you are on YouTube right now, please still make sure to throw us a download on whatever and maybe all podcast directories that you consume podcasts from. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube page. Really helps us grow, gets us an idea of where we're growing, how we're helping more people, and where we're going in this journey. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm so very, very glad that you are here. I hope you're ready for a great episode. It's going to be a lot of fun. We got a lot to cover today. But before we get into any of that, we got to talk about what we are, what we do, what we don't do, and what we aren't. So again, my name is Matthew M. I am an addict in recovery. And this is the Clean and Filthy Podcast. We are a weekly podcast focusing on the 12-step program for recovery from the disease of addiction. We are here as a safe place for anyone and everyone who maybe has questions about recovery from addiction, who maybe has experience with recovery from addiction, who maybe needs some experience, strength, and hope regarding the topic of recovery from the disease of addiction. And that is what we are here to do. This is a fun opportunity to get more information about the disease of addiction, about recovery from the disease of addiction, and the things that addicts like myself go through on a daily basis. So if you are new here, welcome. I'm so very thankful that you're here, and I really hope you come back. And if you like what you hear, share. Please share. Thank you. But I want to make sure to stay in line with the traditions. So I will not be speaking from a point of authority or identification in terms of any one specific 12-step fellowship. I will not be speaking directly about what my home group is or what my fellowship of choice is or what treatment center I went to or where I went to a recovery residence or sober living. But if you have questions about any topics that we don't discuss here on air, please make sure to reach out to myself, again, Matthew at CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com, or on any social media link, and I would be more than happy to answer any and all questions possible. But I do want to stay in line with the traditions, so I will not be discussing those things right here on air. But if you have those questions, send them over. So if you are here right now, thank you for being here. You're exactly where you should be. If you're an addict in recovery, you're exactly where you should be. If you're an addict who's not in recovery, that's fine. Maybe you'll get some information, and maybe you'll hear something that will help start that journey of recovery. At the end of the day, this podcast is here to help anyone and everyone affected by the disease of addiction, which even if somebody out there doesn't realize that they're probably affected by the disease of addiction, because this disease is everywhere. Not just within drug use, but so much more than that. And we always talk about that the beautiful thing about recovery is it's not simply about not using drugs. Not using drugs is one very small part of it. The rest of recovery is about what us addicts in recovery do to grow and become better human beings and leave the world a better place. At least that's my personal experience of strength and hope on that topic. But this podcast, while it could be a great added bonus to whatever your recovery journey is, or maybe it could be a launch pad for, jumping into recovery, this should never replace anything that you're already doing within your recovery. This should not replace going to a meeting. This should not replace having a home group or calling your sponsor or working steps or being of service. At the end of the day, this should just be an opportunity to have some questions answered, to get some more information about recovery. And you know what? Maybe have some fun, because at the end of the day, recovery is fun. And I love having fun. So if you're here right now with me, if you're listening right now with me, I appreciate it so very much. Thank you so much for being here. And let's get into a really fun episode. Like I said, we got a lot to cover today. We had a lot to cover last week, but we're going to continue off from that. So it's time to get into our first segment of the week.
Let's head to the lab for some R&D. Recovery and development.
That's right, y'all. We are in the lab for some recovery and development. This is the part of the show where we discuss something out of the 12-step recovery model. We might be talking about steps. We might be talking about traditions. We might be talking about concepts. We might be talking about spiritual principles or any of the other things that us addicts in recovery add to our lives on a daily basis to try and grow and strengthen our recovery. So this is definitely the most recovery focused part of this podcast. There's plenty of other stuff that isn't all about experience, strength, and hope. But this first segment, we're coming from all experience, strength, and hope with a little bit of my opinion, which I make sure that, when I sprinkle it in there, I let y'all know. But if you're not an addict in recovery and you don't understand the 12 steps or the traditions, the spiritual principles, hang out, check it out. Because I personally will always say that I believe everybody in this world should work the 12-step model. Whether it's on drugs, whether it's on a process addiction, whether it's just to become a better human being, I completely and totally believe that it is a beneficial process of recovery that everybody should partake in. So if you're here right now, just hang out, just chill, just hang out for a little bit. Maybe you'll hear something you like. And if you do, I really hope to see you next week. So this is part 2 because last week we had too much to cover. For those who don't know, for episodes 1 through 12 of this podcast, we covered steps 1 through 12 of the 12-step model. And episodes 13 through 24, we covered traditions 1 through 12 of the 12-step model. And now we are working through the literature. Last week, we talked about chapter 9, Just for Today, Living the Program, part 1. There was too much in there, though, y'all. It was too much. So we had to break it up into 2 parts. So this episode is going to be covering chapter 9, again, titled Just for Today, Living the Program, but part 2. So if you have not listened to episode 32, I highly recommend going back and checking out that episode, since this really, it's a continuation of the chapter. So it's very important to have an idea of what was going on in the first part of the chapter before going into the second part. And while you're at it, I highly recommend checking out all of our previous episodes, because everything within this podcast, just like everything in recovery, has been building on the previous episode. So I highly recommend checking that out. And hopefully, you are all caught up and you're ready to get into the second part of chapter 9. And again, I don't want to list what the piece of literature is to make sure that I do stay in line with the traditions. But again, I will say it is our most basic piece of literature. And again, it is entitled, chapter 9, Just for Today, Living the Program. So check it out. See if there's some stuff in there that vibes with you. And hopefully, this episode gives you a further understanding of that chapter. So, in part 1, we discussed the importance of developing spirituality, the importance of developing a higher power. Because in my opinion, that is the most important part of one of the most important chapters in all the literature. That is the most important part in that chapter. So I wanted to discuss that first because, as I said last week, I really don't believe that the rest of this chapter works without that development of spirituality. Maybe it would work to some level. Maybe there would still be some benefit. But if I remove the spirituality part and remove the higher power development from the rest of this chapter, it doesn't build the way it could. It doesn't build the way that it should from this addict's experience, strength, and hope. And it's, I wanted to discuss that spiritual component because it does tie into the rest of the chapter. We're going to be talking about the how of the program. We're going to be talking about facing life on life's terms and working the steps to change and the importance of the 5 suggestions. But again, the rest of the chapter really wouldn't have worked without that initial spiritual development. So, like we always do, we got to look at the spiritual principles that are within the rest of this chapter. And this is, again, my personal perspective on the spiritual principles within this chapter. Every chapter, everything about the program, and every piece of literature has a countless number of spiritual principles within it. But these are the ones that really vibe with me while reading through this chapter, chapter 9. And they are honesty, open-mindedness, willingness, more on that in a second, faith, hope, love, fellowship, sharing, empathy, service, and acceptance. So starting off into the second part, the episode, of episode 33 here, part 2 of chapter 9. In my opinion, we got to talk about the second most important thing in this chapter, and probably the second most important thing within my recovery, especially early on. And that is the concept of how, the how of the program. It says in the literature, the 3 basic spiritual principles are honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. These are the how of the program. And while we have discussed all 3 of these at length over the last 32 episodes, and honestly, we will continue discussing them at length going forward, hopefully till episode 3,000 or 33,000. That's my goal. I would probably be, I'd be dead by then, but whatever. I'm gonna get some like vampire solution, and we're gonna do this podcast until the sun collapses in like 4 billion years. I digress. So we are discussing these 3 spiritual principles because they truly are the how of the program, and they are so incredibly important within my personal recovery. So we have to discuss them more. And while, as it says in the literature, honesty, open-mindedness, work, and willingness work hand in hand, I figured it was the perfect time to discuss how they all work together. And so we got to look first off at honesty. Everybody knows what honesty is, right? It's the quality of being honest. And I got to say, honesty for myself was a spiritual principle that was difficult prior to getting into recovery. Both towards myself, where I never actually had an honest assessment of myself. And then when that was coupled with this never-ending denial, led to absolute years of blatant dishonesty towards myself, but also towards others. I've always struggled since I was young with confrontation. And so for me, from an early point in my life, I realized that lying, being dishonest, was easier than confrontation. And that was compounded with my active addiction, because addicts and active addiction, we are not honest people. Is there an addict out there who's in active addiction that is genuinely honest with themselves or with others? I don't know if it's possible. I know from my personal experience of active addiction, there was no chance I could be honest. Everything in my life revolved around dishonesty. To the people around me, to the ways and means I tried to find more money or opportunity to get drugs, to myself, to this incredible belief that I wasn't an addict, to this denial that I wasn't an addict, this everyday dishonesty to myself. So when I had that type of a background regarding honesty in recovery was something that I struggled with. And while I did have, as it says in the literature, the initial honesty that we express is the desire to stop using, I did have that. And I was very quick to admit, as it says in the literature, honestly admitting our powerlessness and unmanageability of my life. But being honest with others and to others was much more of a struggle. And not so much direct dishonesty, not direct lies, but more half-truths or lies of omission. And those are all elements of dishonesty. The character defect of dishonesty, which is the opposite of the spiritual principle of honesty. It says in the literature, rigorous honesty is the most important tool in learning to live for today. Although honesty is difficult to practice, it is most rewarding.
That part.
And to me, that honesty then translates into the open-mindedness and the willingness. But all of that starts with honesty, at least to myself. And that honesty, the more that we do it, it grows. For an addict like me, maybe there are people out there, your story isn't like mine. Maybe you've always been, never tell a lie, 100% George Washington status, right? It was George Washington, right? He never told a lie, or was it Abraham Lincoln? Shit, I got to go take a history class. Regardless, I digress. Maybe you've never had an issue with honesty. Maybe you're the one addict out there that went all through active addiction and was completely honest the whole time. But that's not my story. That's not my story at all. There's a lot of dishonesty within my story, both prior to active addiction, massively through active addiction, and also while getting into recovery. But the beautiful thing about spiritual principles is that the more that we work them, the more that they can be worked, the more that they become capable of being worked in life. And it gets to the point where by not giving a half-truth or not giving a lie of omission, then the next time, I don't really think to give a half-truth. I was the notorious in my active addiction, even prior to my active addiction, of like, somebody be like, hey, where are you? Oh, I'm on the way. I was that motherfucker who was on the way. I was still laying in bed at this point, but I would say, I'm on my way. Or when will you be here? Oh, I'll be there soon. Knowing I still had to stop by the bank, had to stop by the dope man, had to make this and this and this. I was always that type of a person who would give those like, maybe it could be plausible, maybe. Like I'm technically starting the process of being on the way. So that's kind of honest, right? Nah, that's the type of addict I was when I got here. So I had a lot of difficulty still doing that. I always would feel less than in a way. Like if I was running late for something, I was never able to just to take responsibility for that. Even early on in recovery. If I was supposed to be somewhere at a specific time and I was running late, it was, oh, there was traffic. Oh, there was an issue with this. Rather than simply saying, I fucked around for too long. I couldn't get out of bed because I would feel less than. Because I wasn't practicing the spiritual principle of honesty. But as we do it, it becomes more and more easy to do. To the point that I remember there's this one instance within my life, within my recovery, that was kind of a watershed moment for me. I was driving to go see a friend, and I was driving down Shea Boulevard. If you're not from Arizona, maybe that means nothing to you. But it's a main thoroughfare. And my friend asked, hey, where are you? And I immediately said, about to get on the 101. Technically, I was about 1.5 miles away from getting on the freeway. Technically, that was not false. That wasn't dishonest. That just wasn't fully honest. And then as I was sitting at the light after I sent that text, I then sent another text and said, actually, I'm here. I'm actually on Shea and Hayden. That's where I am. And that moment, that feeling was incredibly rewarding, as it says, as we just read, that rigorous honesty is the most important tool. And even though it's difficult to practice, it is the most rewarding. And it was, and it's so weird. If you've never struggled with the concept of honesty, this is going to sound off the wall to you. Like, why are you feeling good about being honest? You're supposed to, as Chris Rock would say, you dumb motherfucker. Like, and I get that. But for me, this is my story. This is my experience, strength, and hope on the spiritual principle of honesty. And when I said that, my friend was like, okay, it literally doesn't matter. Who cares? Okay, so you're still almost about to get on the freeway, like you said. But for me, it was a big deal. And the more that I'm able to practice that rigorous honesty, the more that I can stay in the spiritual principle of honesty. But it works the other way as well. It's if I'm dishonest, that dishonesty can grow on itself. And for an addict like me, it can grow exponentially. one little half-truth or lie of omission or not rigorous honesty. Let's just say it's still honest, but it's not rigorously honest. Means the next time, maybe it's just kind of honest. It means the next time, maybe it's just, could be honest. And next thing you know, it's into lies of omission. And it's into partial truth. And it's into flat-out dishonesty. I know for me, that can snowball really quickly. I can fall back to the old patterns, my old patterns of thinking, if I'm not making a conscious effort to grow and create new patterns of thinking. It says in the literature, honesty is the antidote to our diseased thinking. And there have been many times in my recovery that I had to make a conscious choice to be honest. There have been many times that I've actually had to ask other addicts, is this being honest? Is this being honest if I say this? I had to ask. And for somebody out there who doesn't lie, who doesn't have difficulties with this sounds so crazy. But for me personally, this is my experience, strength, and hope. But when I'm able to align that honesty and I'm able to practice that spiritual principle, that goes to the connection with my higher power and wanting to align my will with its. And sometimes that takes effort of sitting there like, is this honest? And then I think, is this doing the next right thing? Because I always talk about how important the third step was for me, about aligning my will with that of my higher powers. And I genuinely believe that my higher power's will is to be honest. It's to live in the spiritual principle of honesty. Sometimes I want to take my will back, though. Sometimes I don't want to be living in that honesty. But honesty is where it all starts for this addict. Maybe your story's different. Maybe your struggle isn't with honesty. Maybe it's something completely different. But for me personally, that's something that's still difficult to this day. Because I will fall back into the justifications, the rationalizations, the addict thinking very, very quickly if I'm not making a concerted effort to strengthen my connection with spiritual principles, with strengthen my spirituality, where spiritual principles are a foundation within. But let's say now we're good on the honesty part. We developed the honesty. We have an honest desire to stop using, right? That's at least a piece of honesty that no matter how much of a deceitful, dishonest, untrustworthy addict I was, if I have the sincere desire and I can honestly say I have the desire to stop using, all right, I've got a piece of honesty that I can build off of. Well, now that leads to open-mindedness. And it says in the literature that, because a new idea cannot be grafted on a closed mind, open-mindedness is so vital. And we've talked about this before. Prior to getting into recovery, I was so closed-minded to anything and everything, especially towards the last couple years of my active addiction. It says in the literature that their closed mind, like mine was, is a barrier to change. And we've talked about how important open-mindedness is within my personal recovery, within the personal journeys of essentially all addicts. Because within that open-mindedness that I've built off of from that initial honesty, I was able to develop and grow spirituality, to be open to the concept of recovery, even that I needed help. Because if I wouldn't have been able to be open-minded to the concept of needing help, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. And none of those things could have happened without that initial honesty. It says in the literature, being open-minded allows us to hear something that might save our lives. And this is exactly my story. I can tell you unequivocally, without any shadow of a doubt, I would not be sitting here right now with over 3.5 years clean, carrying the message of hope about recovery, hopefully around the world and across the cosmos, if it wasn't for open-mindedness. It's not a thing. It would not have happened. Because you can't graft a new idea on a closed mind, period. A big new idea within there is recovery. That was a new idea to me. But thankfully, I had a shred of open-mindedness. Because when I was in my active addiction, I was horribly closed-minded. My way was right. When you've been up for multiple days and add to some dope sickness, we get very self-centered and we get very self-righteous. And we feel got to look out for number one all time, every time, and that's me. Closed-mindedness ties right into that. And when I was in my active addiction, if you disagreed with me, man, fuck you. No ifs, ands, or buts. Fuck you. It says in the literature that open-mindedness allows us to listen to opposing points of view and come to conclusions of our own. Open-mindedness leads us to the very insights that have eluded us during our lives. It is this principle that allows us to participate in a discussion without jumping to conclusions or predetermining right and wrong. And I admit, especially in the current world conditions, this can be difficult. Especially now with social media, everybody feels they need to share their opinion and that their opinion is right. But just like we talked about last week, everything we know is subject to revision, especially what we know about the truth. And that's completely impossible if I have a closed mind. If I have a closed mind and those barriers are up and those walls are up and my shit is fucking fortified with 4-foot cement walls in a safe room and nothing's getting in there, then how could I ever look at anything for revision? I couldn't. I would be physically incapable. But if I can open up that door to that safe room and have a little bit of open-mindedness to see somebody else's perspective, I don't have to agree with it. I don't have to vibe with it. But I also don't have to get invested to the point that it's right or wrong. That's all it is. If I can be open-minded, then you can have your opinion, I can have my opinion, and maybe my opinion will change. Maybe your opinion will change. Regardless, it's possible if I'm open-minded. But all the open-mindedness in the world doesn't mean shit without the action required in willingness. That part. That to me, willingness, the action of willingness is so important, in my opinion, within recovery, especially early on. It says in the literature, open-mindedness without willingness, however, will get us nowhere. We must be willing to do whatever is necessary to recover. And this really feels like I'm if you've heard the quote before, it's the words without action is manipulation. To me, I feel like open-mindedness without willingness is like self-manipulation. And I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else out there. I don't know if that's just how my fucking brain computes things, which is a scary place to be. I'll admit that. So maybe it makes no sense to any of y'all. But to me personally, open-mindedness without the willingness required, I'm cheating myself. I'm manipulating myself. And the action required for willingness can be scary, man. Especially when that willingness is in an area that we have no experience, like getting into recovery. And this is why having that spirituality is so vital. This is why having a connection to a power greater than myself is so vital. Because I can have faith in my higher power. I can ask for willingness. We talked about this a ton in Step 8, Episode 8. Check it out regarding willingness. We talked about this a ton. Because I can ask for willingness and I can have the faith that my action is supported. And if I have faith, that means I've gotten rid of fear. We talked about that. We turn our fear into faith. And if I need to do an action and I have fear, I'm much less likely to do that fucking action. But if I'm operating on faith, having that action done, having that action actually occur, far easier from this addict's humble perspective. And because these three spiritual principles work so well together, we have to make an effort to build on them constantly. It says in the literature, one way to practice the principles of how is by taking a daily inventory. Our inventory allows us to recognize our daily growth. And that's because recovery has to grow daily. Because my disease of addiction is progressive. It says that. It's incurable, progressive, and fatal. So my recovery has to be progressive as well. And it says in the literature that the 12 steps are a progressive recovery process established in our daily living. And since this is a spiritual program, my spirituality has to grow daily. Because when it doesn't, as we talked about last week, my character defects like to pop up. And if I'm not trying to grow spiritually, those character defects start to look a lot more appealing. We talked about this last week. That if I'm not living in spirituality, if I'm not living in spiritual principles, and I let those defects even start to creep up in the background, again, snowball. It'll just, okay, now defects seem a little bit more appealing. And now they're a little more appealing. And now they're a little more appealing. And now I'm fucking living in defect. And that could be a very dangerous place. It says in the literature, the lack of one of these principles in our personal program can lead to relapse and will certainly make recovery difficult and painful when it could be simple. And this is a fucking fact for me. My lack of honesty did exactly this. And while I did not relapse, thankfully, I was blessed to have not put a substance into my body. My dishonesty snowballed, avalanched, fucking avalanched. So I made my life and those around me so incredibly painful and difficult because I detached that honesty piece. And again, it wasn't an instant thing. It wasn't like I made a conscious choice, like, I'm going to be dishonest. I'm done with the spiritual principle of honesty. Let's live in defect. Nah, it crept up. It was one time of being a little dishonest. And it was the next time of being a little more dishonest. And the next thing I know was flat out, outright dishonesty that had effects on myself and others around me that made everything painful when it didn't need to be. So now that we've developed this how of the program, right? Now we're developing this on a daily basis and bringing in more spiritual principles. Well, how do we bring in more spiritual principles more than just this how? Because the how is the foundation. Well, we do that by working steps with our sponsor, by going to meetings, by having a home group, by talking to other members, by being of service. And by doing that, we start developing some acceptance. We start developing some faith, some courage, some patience, some tolerance, some humility, surrender, compassion, caring, and gratitude. And as those all develop in our recovery, they then start developing into our life outside of recovery. Because everything that I'm doing in my recovery is to grow within the other elements of my life. And even though recovery is a very, very big part of my life, it isn't the only part of my life. But the things I've learned in recovery, the spiritual principles I've developed, the changes and the growth that's occurred are able to then work across all other areas. So that when life on life's terms happens, which it will, as it says in the literature, staying clean is the first step to facing life. When problems arise, we hope to be well equipped with the tools of the program. And every spiritual principle we develop, that's a tool to put on the tool belt. When we practice acceptance, our lives are simplified. When we focus on spiritual principles like surrender, we let go of self-obsession. Then we can face fear and turn it into faith. And this is all with the help of a higher power. This all is within doing step work. In every single step that we work in, the experience that we gain with those spiritual principles, when we can act in spiritual principles instead of character defects, that's another tool on the tool belt. It says in the literature, as recovering addicts, we come to know gratitude. As our defects are removed, we are free to become all that we can. And each step, each meeting that we talk about a different spiritual principle, each time that we can act in the spiritual alternative to that character defect, our tool belt is filling up. And now our tool belt is pretty well stocked. We look like a motherfucking Home Depot. I look like the entire Makita section of Home Depot. Most days. Some days not so much, but most days. And it says in the literature that now we can accept responsibility for our problems and see that we're equally responsible for our solutions. And all that builds off that foundation. All that builds off that foundation of honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. But once we have that foundation, we can start adding those countless spiritual principles to our recovery, to ourselves. And we start building levels. And we start building maybe some balconies, maybe some rooms. Maybe we add, the additional spiritual principles of emotions and responsibilities. And as it said in the literature, become feeling people capable of responding appropriately to life. And we keep doing that. And we keep doing that. And more levels and more floors and more balconies until ideally we all got a fucking Burj Khalifa sized recovery building based off of that foundation that we developed with honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And as I progress within that, and when I'm focusing on those 3 spiritual principles, as well as the additional ones that we develop, I'm no longer living based on animalistic, defensive instinct like I was in active addiction. And because the principles of this program shape our personalities, as it says in the literature, I'm slower to anger, and I'm quicker to forgive. I have learned to, as it says, put spiritual living first and learn to use patience, tolerance, and humility in our daily affairs. And because this program is a vital part of our everyday living, we can carry the gifts of recovery with us everywhere. Everywhere I go in life, I have the gifts that I've developed in recovery. I have the tools on my recovery tool belt. I have the opportunity to approach and address life on life's terms. When life shows up, I have a spiritual alternative now. I no longer have to live in defect. I'm not saying that there haven't been times I chose to live in defect, because I'm not perfect. None of us are. We always are growing. We always are building. We're always remodeling. We're always revisiting the things that we have developed to improve them. But that foundation of honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness is something that shaped my recovery early on. When I first heard that, my first meeting, I was like, wow, okay. All right. And that's continued to grow and shape and help mold my recovery for the last 3.5 years. The basics of this program are the basics because they work. We always talk about this, the program, a 12-step program of recovery is such a simple program for complex people. But when we can keep it at its basic level, and we cannot try to complicate it or try to rationalize it or overanalyze it like this fucking addict is notorious to do. If we can do that, we can get freedom. We can develop lives. We can develop lives worth living and then get to live them as different human beings than what we walked into the rooms at. I can say that 1,000% that I am not the same person I was 3.5 years ago. And I can pretty well promise you, I'm not the same person today as I'm going to be at 5 years from now, assuming that I stay in the program, assuming that I'm clean just for today. Because what I've developed over this last 3.5 years, based on the spiritual principles, the how of the program specifically, man, sky's the limit, to tie back into that whole Burj Khalifa tall building analogy there. Back on the engineering analogies, I guess. I digress. So I'm going to close with this quote that I really like. And it says, "We live a day at a time, but also from moment to moment. When we stop living in the here and now, our problems become magnified unreasonably. Patience isn't a strong point for us. That's why we need our slogans and our fellowship friends to remind us to live the program just for today. I can't. We can."
That part.
And that, to me, is the absolute fact. I can't do this, but together, we can, just for today. So that's what we have for Chapter 9, Part 2. Hopefully, that tied up the rest of the chapter quite well. Again, I'm sorry we had to break it into 2 chapters, but into two episodes, but there was so much to go over. Again, I didn't want it to be a 4-hour-long episode or segment, so we did it this way. Hopefully that ties everything up pretty well. You get a good understanding of Chapter 9, just for today, living the program. And come back next week as we will be on Chapter 10. And then that first piece of literature will be officially gone over. Pretty fucking crazy, I gotta say. Pretty crazy. So, that's what we got for the first segment of Recovery and Development. It's time to hop out the lab. It's time to put away all of our biological mess. It's time to scrub out and get into the next segment of the show, entitled My Favorite Moment of the Week. This is the part of the show where we talk about something that has occurred over the last 7 days that I personally really liked. It might be from news, sports, social media, pop culture. It might be from Instagram or TikTok. Who knows where it's from? But it's something that I personally have vibed with over the last 7 days. So, it's supposed to be my favorite moment of the week. Instead, it's my favorite moments of the week because I like having options. And even though we do not currently have a Bang sponsorship, we're still going to do a free Bang ad read. That's right, y'all. I'm a yummy Bang can. You know you want me in ya. Get a nice drink of this delectable flavor. 300 milligrams of caffeine, super creatine, CoQ10s, and ultra EAA aminos. Bang. Open your mouth, take a slurp. It's delicious. Now, to anybody who's not watching the live stream, that's going to not make much sense, but we're having some fun with my OBS software. So if you're on the live stream right now, hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully you're cracking a bang and consuming it with the rest of us here. So shout out to Bang. Sponsor me, yo. That was creative. Sponsor me. Come on. Just sponsor me. All right. First off, got to get the sip. All right, let's go. First part, we always talk about my weekly fitness update. Why? Because it helps keep me accountable. And if y'all are keeping me accountable, that's beneficial for me. So I was quite happy. Could have been a little bit happier if it would have been 0.7 lower. But my current weight is 210.6 pounds. Pretty happy with that. I've actually been pretty solid in my workouts. I worked out 3 days last week. Was wanting to do more than that. I had my son this past weekend, and we were super busy. We went to the aquarium. We saw dinosaurs and went swimming. So I can get a chance to go a couple other days. But we're still doing super core and cardio. I've officially reached that point where I'm actually enjoying doing core and cardio. Yeah, it's scary. Ugh. But I'm enjoying it. I'm aiming to go 4 or 5 times this week. I'm going to probably be going tonight. I've got my food all made up for the next like 5 days. So we're going to be eating very, very healthily, cleanly, to the best of my ability over this next week. I'm really trying to get into to sub 210 for my own mental. I don't know. I just really want that. Also, I was watching some old YouTube videos. All of my old YouTube videos are still on my old YouTube channel. When I was almost 300 pounds, and my goodness gracious, I didn't realize how round my face was. Or else I was just so high that I didn't really care. But like looking back on it there, I genuinely don't even believe it's me. I know it's me because I'm me. I know, I understand that. I know we aren't living in a simulation theory, no matter how many drugs I did. I get it, probably. But I digress. But looking at that picture of me was like, whoa. So if you want more information and you want to go back and watch some of my absolutely horrible videos from about 10 years ago with no production value, look like they were filmed on a damn potato, let me know. I don't want to say it on air because it says my last name in it, and I want to, not identify, staying anonymous. So just if you want some information, let me know. Also, super excited that the Arizona Regional Convention is coming up in less than 3 weeks, October 15th through 18th. The last day to buy full registrations for the convention is on October 1st. So if you're interested in going to the convention and you want to see all the stuff, be part of all the meals, let me know. I will get you some information as to how to purchase your full registration. Or if you're wanting to be of service at the convention, holla at me because I can always find some service work to put somebody into. So if you want any information, let me know. I'm really excited about that. Like really, really excited about that. Nervous as fuck because there's so many things that have to be done before then, but I'm so excited. Got to do our quick little TV wrap up. I'll admit there wasn't a whole lot to cover this week. We'll talk about what if Thor and Loki weren't brothers. Pretty useless episode, in my opinion. It was still fun, but it wasn't really a good episode. It wasn't something that I felt like, oh, wow. It was still enjoyable. I mean, it was cool seeing the party prince going to Vegas, and we had Grandmaster Jeff Goldblum as a DJ working the ones and twos. We had Howard the Duck and Kat Dennings' character getting married, and Thor and Jane Foster getting matching tattoos. Like, that was cool. Also, they did like kind of a nod to Loki getting his ass beat in the desert. This time they had Thor getting his ass beat in the desert. That was kind of cool. And the ending was cool. Infinity Stone Ultron was pretty cool. And I'll admit, when they first brought his head out, it kind of looked like Galactus for a second. And I lost my shit. I was like, holy fuck, did they just actually reference Galactus? No, they didn't. They didn't. It was Infinity. It was just Infinity Stone Ultron, which is a terrifying thought if you really think about it. Ultron with the Infinity Stones, that's pretty fucking terrifying. But the fact that the whole episode was essentially Thor being scared of his mother was just like super filler episode to me. And then we go to Archer and What We Do in the Shadows, and both of those were kind of filler episodes. I will say, in What We Do in the Shadows, there was a great shade thrown towards the My Pillow guy with the whole guy pillow. That was quite well done. But it was just kind of filler episodes. But I will say, last night, finished rewatching season 1 of The Wire. And I got to say, it holds up really well 20 years later. Really well. I'm always worried to rewatch my favorite shows years later because I'm worried that I'm just going to be in a different mental place or the quality's not going to be good. But The Wire holds up really well. The writing is very well done. It's a very slow burn process. Shout out to David Simon. Great show. But it's funny having this constant reminder of like 2000s fashion, like hip hop style fashion, and like the 4XL t-shirts. At one point, Bodie was wearing a shirt. I'm like, hey, I used to have that same Rockaware shirt. Yeah, so that's definitely a trip down memory lane. And it's also funny how big of a deal gay relations were back then. Like, it's so weird to see with where we are 20 years later and how much more progressive society is in general, that seeing the fact that there's a lesbian relationship is like this, oh my God moment, when it's like, yeah, and? It's interesting to try to remember how things were 20 years ago. So that's my TV wrap-up. Also, got to talk about Formula One. To anybody out there, if you don't like Formula One, you should check it out. It's the best type of racing that there is with the best type of cars of racing that there is. But the Russian Grand Prix from Sochi was crazy. Absolutely crazy. We got to talk about it because some major things happened. But it was a beautifully clean race by Lando Norris, leading pretty much the whole time, searching for his first win, with Lewis Hamilton right behind him, working. It was beautiful. And then with 5 laps left, the rain came, and Lewis Hamilton pitted and got some intermediate tires, but Lando Norris didn't. And the tire difference, coupled with Lewis having far more experience in the rain and just in general seat time, led to Lando making some mistakes. And that led to Lewis Hamilton winning his 100th Formula One Grand Prix race. First driver in history to do that. They've said a stat that, like, Brazil, who has had some amazing drivers, as a country, have won less than 100. And one man did it. And the haters will say, yeah, but I mean, Mercedes has always been so superior. And there were multiple years there where Mercedes was a step ahead of the competition. I'll admit that. I'm not denying that. But regardless, that is impressive. Nobody talks shit on, like, Bill Russell for having 11 rings, even though he was the only tall dude. Even though the game was so different then, they still say, goddamn, dude had 11 rings. Well, I'm saying, goddamn, Lewis Hamilton hit 100 Formula One victories and officially retakes the championship lead. He should have been up by more than the 2 points that he is over Max Verstappen, but Max Verstappen started in position 20 and came all the way back up to second. Hell of a fucking drive for him. I digress. Also got to give a shout out to the Ryder Cup. I don't watch much golf, but I definitely watch the majors, and I definitely watch the Ryder Cup. And this Ryder Cup was intense, strictly for no other reason than Bryson DeChambeau and his goddamn intercontinental nuclear fucking driver out here driving 400-yard greens and shit, par fours. People talk shit about Bryson DeChambeau. I fucking love the dude. He was super engaged with the crowd. He was having fun. To me, that's what it's supposed to be about. U.S. wins 19-9, absolutely thrashed Europe. Got to talk about football. And I almost lied to y'all. I almost did it. I almost lied to y'all. Because this weekend in the NFL had an absolutely incredible moment. And if I had gotten to see it live, the statement I said last week that we won't be talking about football next week, I would have proven myself a liar. I would not have been practicing the spiritual principle of honesty, because it would have been my favorite moment of the week. But thankfully, for y'all's sake, the Ravens were not broadcast on TV here in Arizona. But we still got to talk about it. First off, shout out to the Cardinals. Should not have been that difficult to beat Jacksonville. Played well in the second half. Officially 3-0. Playing the Rams this weekend, who are also 3-0 and look really fucking good. First place in the division is on the line. It's going to be a scary game. Cardinals are going to be definite underdogs, but if somebody can corral the defense of the Rams, I think that there might be an opportunity, but who the fuck's corralling Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald? Like, I don't know. We'll see what happens. But we got to talk about the Ravens game, y'all. In Detroit, Ravens go in a 7.5-point favorite, right? First off, I got to give credit where credit's due. The Lions played pretty well from what I watched of recaps. Like I said, I didn't get to watch it live. They had more first downs than the Ravens. They had more time of possession. And they had a big fourth quarter to take the lead 17-16 against the Ravens. The Ravens really couldn't get any offense going from what I saw. Couldn't get into the end zone. They got one touchdown. And at that point, 3 field goals from Mr. Justin Tucker. So now it's fourth quarter, and they're down. They're down with like a minute to go, and they're facing 4th and 19. And shout out to Lamar. Everybody's going to be talking about something else because of this game, but shout out to Lamar for converting 4th and 19 from essentially his own fucking end zone. Well, damn near. Wasn't quite there, but close. And that set up the opportunity for the GOAT, greatest of all time, Justin Tucker, who had already made 3 field goals in the game, to have the opportunity to potentially kick a record-breaking 66-yard field goal for the win. And he did it, y'all. He fucking kicked a 66-yard field goal that landed directly on the crossbar, and instead of bouncing out, bounced through for the win. 66-yard NFL fucking record. I'm glad this wasn't on TV because I would have lost my shit. Like, people across, all my new listeners from over in Europe would have heard me. I would have been screaming so damn loud. So for the sake of my vocal cords, I'm glad that it wasn't on television. But the entire, oh my God, I mean, it's incredible. It's the first time that's ever happened in the history of the NFL. So have to talk about it. I'm sorry. Have to talk about it. So now Ravens win. Officially are 2-1 on the season. Week 4, they're going to be the underdog going into 3-0 Denver. It's going to be a good game. I'm going to have to, I got to have some Denver fans out there that we're going to have to put some bang energy bets on the line. Also, side note, how painful does it have to be a Lions fan? Like I'll admit there were a lot of years as a Cardinals fan that it was difficult, but the team just sucked. They were just trash, right? Just
garbage. Absolute trash.
But the Lions are always right there. They're always in it. They're a gritty team. I love Campbell as a coach. Like, they're always right there. And the number of last second, I mean, the Ravens did it a season ago with a 61-yarder to win the game. Like, it's just, I genuinely feel bad for him. And I know it's also partly because I got family in Michigan. You know, I've been around Lions fans my whole life. But as Goff said, I mean, the number of last second gut punches, as he said, I mean, it's endless. It's truly endless. So we had to talk about that. Also, shout out to Andy Reid. He officially went to the hospital after the loss to the Chargers, but he was released. So I went 3-1. I finally got a win. Shout out to my boy Ass Tapper out there, Daniel. I beat you. Yeah. So I'm officially won my first game in that league and absolutely got destroyed in the other league. So I went 3-1. Cardinals win, Ravens win, 1-1 fantasy. I lost the other one, but we're creeping. We're creeping up, right? 2-2. So now 3-1. Next week we going 4-0, baby. You heard it here first. All right. Done with football. Sorry, y'all. Welcome back. We're done with sports for the day. One of the best things off of social media have been the salt pranks that people have been doing where they fill a spoon up with salt and like dip it in the food and then feed it to somebody. And the reactions there, oh my God, there's some of them that are absolutely hilarious. I'll just check them out if you haven't. Also, shout out to Jermaine. J. Cole dropped Your Heart, a song with Joyner Lucas that is fire. And also Heaven's EP, which is fire. Shout out to J. Cole. Always comes through with absolute fire, classic type music. He doesn't miss. Like, even when he does miss, it's still not a miss. It's still just not a complete J. Cole make. Anyway, I digress. Next up, though, we got to talk about my actual favorite moment of the week. And this is a very random interaction with somebody that I had that reminded me the importance of just being a good human being. So to give a little background on it, I had a conversation on Snapchat, totally random conversation with a dude that I met like 2+ years ago when I was working at a concert venue. And he and his boys were there at the concert. And this dude, he was under the influence. He was very under the influence. And he was kind of freaking out a little. And so I just talked to him. Just as a human being who'd been in that experience before. I just shared some help, if you will. I shared some experience within what he was going through. And ended up, at that point, I was trying to build, I was new to Snapchat, so I was trying to build my Snapchat everywhere I could. So I would scan everybody's Snap code. And randomly, like 2 days ago, we're just having a conversation about something he had posted, a meme, and I responded to it. And he hit me up and he's like, bro, I tell people to this day, you saved my life that night. And for me, this is an experience, like, until he mentioned it, I didn't even remember it. Because it was just me doing the next right thing. So it's so crazy that when we do the next right thing, and even though, it was definitely an exaggeration. I didn't save his life that night. I didn't, Narcan him or something. He was going through it on some party drugs that he'd never taken before. And he didn't know why he was feeling how he was feeling. So we talked. I gave him some water. I gave him some paper towels to wipe his head from the copious amount of sweat. And we just bullshitted for a couple hours. And to me, that was such an inconsequential thing. It was just like, it's just what you do. You help somebody out, especially like in the rave community. That's just like what you do. But to him, that was like not like a core memory, but that was something that he remembers intently. Something that to me was just like, yeah, whatever. But we never know when we're going to have the opportunity to impact someone's life in a positive way. To impact someone's life to where 2.5 years later, they remember it to the point that it's something spoken about. We never know when we're going to have that opportunity. But by doing the next right thing, by being a good human being, by helping humanity to the best of my ability, I might get the opportunity to leave a lasting impact in someone's life. And that's not my goal. That's not my goal at all. But being able to do that, being able to help somebody, man, that's what my life's about in today's day and age. Now, my purpose is I feel, is becoming a better human being to leave the world a better place than I found it. So this was truly just such a beautiful reminder that every day I have the chance to help and leave the world a better place than I found it. And it might not happen every day, and I might never even know when it does happen. But if I'm not open to help, if I'm not open to just be altruistic and just out of myself, if I'm being self-centered, I don't have that opportunity. But if I'm out there just being open-minded, being spiritual to the world, I have the opportunity to potentially help somebody when I didn't even remember it, but it's something that genuinely affected him and impacted him to this day. And that's just a cool reminder. That was just a cool reminder of just being out there doing the next right thing. Because sometimes it's nice to have those reminders. When sometimes doing the next right thing doesn't feel that good. It's nice to know that there is a benefit by me doing that, even if I didn't know about it. So shout out to him. Glad, that I was there to help that night, brother. Glad you made it through it. Glad you're good. And I guess glad that, there's some impact on your life. I'm glad I could leave a positive impact on somebody's life. Because that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. So that's what we got for my favorite moment of the week this week. I know it's a little weird. It's not like the standard one. Not like but hey, we didn't talk about football for another week, right? So you're welcome, my non-sports viewers. You're welcome. I did it for y'all. I didn't really, but you're welcome regardless. So come back next week where we're going to talk about more things that have happened over the last week. Talk about my favorite moment of the week. If you have any moments that have popped up over the last week and you, want me to maybe talk about them on air, make sure to send them on any and all social medias or from the website or to my email. I love watching fun stuff, especially TikToks. So send me that fun stuff, especially TikToks. All right. Now it's time to get into our next segment.
It's time to Ask an Addict with your host, Matthew M.
That's right, y'all. It is time for Ask an Addict. This is the part of the show where the resident addict of the Clean and Filthy podcast, yours truly, Matthew M., answers questions submitted by our listeners and our viewers. These do not have to be recovery related. This is like a Reddit AMA, ask me anything. I like answering questions, whether they're about recovery, whether they're about just life in general. I enjoy answering questions. So that's what we do in this part of the show. If you have any questions that you would like my personal opinion, little bit of experience, strength, and hope, maybe my 2 cents or 22 cents because I'm such a wordy motherfucker, send them over to your boy, Matthew at CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com or on any social media channel, and very possibly they will be answered on air. So, first question I got says, what is your favorite type of dessert? Man, what is up with all these damn food questions, man? Like, I'm trying to stick to a healthy meal plan. Why the fuck y'all asking me about dessert, bruh? Goddamn. But I'm going to answer it because I ask y'all to ask me questions, right? So I can't pick and choose. If I get a question, I'm going to answer it, even if it makes me want to go fucking devour every single thing that is full of sugar and fat and unhealthy shit immediately. So let's get into it. First thing, ice cream is always a go-to, y'all. Either Haagen-Dazs vanilla, which I know people like vanilla. That's so basic. Haagen-Dazs vanilla ain't like other vanilla, y'all. That's like another level shit. So Haagen-Dazs vanilla or like Ben & Jerry's half-baked. But first off, fuck both Haagen-Dazs and Ben & Jerry's for them coming in them small-ass containers. Like, why can't y'all give me a fucking a half gallon of that shit? Why you got to put it in a tiny-ass little pint that I'm going to immediately eat all of? Like, how the fuck you gonna buy one of them baby-ass motherfuckers and expect me not to eat the whole fucking thing? The fuck? So fuck y'all for that, but both of those are so fire. I love ice cream. Also love brownies with ice cream. I love like chocolate chip cookie brownies or like cookie cakes or like cookies, like the chocolate chip cookie pizza joints that they have at Oregano's, but they can't call them that because legally or some shit. But those things are fire. Also love pies. Thanksgiving's a fun time for me because I love cherry pie, I love pumpkin pie, I love apple pie. I love cakes. Yes, I'm a fucking trash panda when it comes to fucking desserts. What can I say? I love chocolate cakes. I also love cheesecakes. Cheesecakes are quite fire. Even like a devil's food cake with like strawberry yeah, some strawberry shortcake. I fucks with that. That's yummy too. Key lime pie as well. Yes. You see, key lime's my vibe. Also, one of my favorite desserts was tableside cherries flambe. There's this restaurant in Detroit. I don't know if it's still there. If anybody out there is in Detroit, any of my listeners, let me know if this restaurant's still there. It's a place called Boodles in Detroit, and they did tableside Caesar, and they did tableside cherries flambe. And that shit was fucking incredible. I will say that. It's by far the best cherries flambe I ever had. One of the best desserts I've ever had. But my absolute favorite, because it can go with so many different things and it's available in so many different places. You ain't getting tableside cherry flambe many places. But my absolute favorite is creme brulee because it's consistently good. Most creme brulees that are in a restaurant are going to be pretty good. There have been a couple misses in the days of my creme brulee experience. But for the most part, they're going to be pretty good. And it's the type of thing that when I eat it, I want more. I eat it, and I'm like, wow, I could still eat some more of this. Plus, what I like is it pairs nicely with whatever I've been eating that night. Whether it be steak, go to a steakhouse, get a nice steak, finish that off with the creme brulee, crack that top, or maybe a nice fish, or a pasta. Yes, to all of them. I will eat a goddamn Habit burger and immediately want creme brulee. It pairs very nice. It's not too heavy. It's got a nice consistency. It's got that luscious crunch of the sugar on the top, and oh, it's so good. Plus, I, myself, personally, Matthew M., can make a pretty fucking good creme brulee. I got the full set of ramekins. I even had the industrial kitchen torch. Burn that sugar. I will say towards the end of my active addiction, that torch got repurposed. Definitely got repurposed. Yeah, definitely got repurposed, but I digress. So I would say creme brulee is my go-to for that. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the food questions. I'm sure I'm going to have another one next week. So now I can think about how I'm on a fucking diet and all I want is fucking dessert. Thank you. But I love you. Ask questions. I appreciate your questions. Thank you. All right. Next up, we've got, what is one thing, like actual thing, that you have lost in active addiction that you miss the most? And we aren't talking about like morals or my soul or missed opportunities. We're talking about direct, actual possessions, physical possessions. First off, I gotta say my collection of firearms was massive. One of my massive losses. And before you assume my political positions or anything like that, just realize I'm simply a dude who really likes shooting. I really enjoy being a responsible gun owner. I really enjoy teaching people about responsible firearms. I like working through some of the misinformation and fear-mongering that is in the world about firearms, especially within people in my family. I enjoy that. I like that. I like teaching people how to safely use a firearm. It's something I pride myself on, so I really like that. And I had a collection back in the day. That was one of the things that I spent pretty much all of my money on. All of my money was buying guns, was buying toys. And I had about 50 or so in my collection of pistols, rifles, and shotguns. I mean, pretty much everything you could have in Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, I had the civilian version of it. I had the civilian version of the G36. I had the civilian version of the SCAR. I had the civilian version of the M4, the AK, the P90. I actually had a class 3 short barrel P90. The UMP, I had the civilian version of that with the suppressor on it. So I had multiple class 3 weapons, which are short barrels, fully automatic, suppressed, things like that. I really liked that. I liked being able to go shooting. And the amount of money that I had tied up in that, it would be nice to still have some of those things, to be quite honest. But prior to moving to Las Vegas, I sold the vast majority of my collection for the sake of building my poker bankroll to move to Vegas and become a professional poker player, which in turn turned into my drug bankroll after about 2 weeks there. So, other thing that I really loved was my shoe collection. I got really big into collecting shoes probably around like 2008, 2009, somewhere around then. I had a pretty massive collection of LeBrons, Jordans, Foamposites. There was at one point where I had every single pair of LeBron 9s, including player exclusives, except for I think 4 or 5 pairs. I didn't have the Kentuckys and I didn't have the Miamis. But I loved those shoes. I had tons of Jordans. I had tons of Pradas, Gucci's. Like, you wouldn't see me in the same pair of shoes more than once a month, period. That's just like how it was. And I enjoyed like the whole vibe of being a sneakerhead. And this is before like people were super camping out and like all over sneakers apps and like all of the reselling hype beast fuck shit that happens in today's sneaker culture. God, I sound like that. Get off my lawn, kids. I sound fucking old as hell right now, man. I sound old as hell. But back in my day, Sonny, we didn't go camp out there and use sneakers apps around. Oh, my God, that's horrible. Anyway, I liked being a part of Facebook groups. Like, I have big feet. I have size 15 feet. So we were in a bunch of different Facebook groups, or size 15 LeBrons or size 15 Jordans. And, like, it was fun. It was fun being a part of that whole vibe. And doing sneaker reviews, the videos that I was speaking about earlier of me almost 300 pounds on YouTube. I did a lot of sneaker reviews back in the day while I was building my collection. So doing those type of things were fun. But I sold all my shoes once my poker bankroll ran out living in Vegas. And like I said, the poker bankroll became the drug bankroll, and that ran out. And so I sold off most of my shoes. I still have a few. Couple of pairs of Jordans, couple of pairs of LeBrons, couple pairs of Foamposites that, you know, I still have my Pradas that turned into my hood shoes, running through Sunny Slope in a pair of Pradas, damn near wore holes in them. but I still have some. And that's something I would like to get back into. Not what I had been doing, because I'm kind of glad I got out when I did, because my collecting was getting very addictive. I wanted everything. That's why I had so many pairs of LeBron 9s. I didn't even like the LeBron 9s as much as the LeBron 8s or 7s. But I got a bunch of them, and I'm like, I'm going to get every single pair. I'm going to have every pair of LeBron 9s. Started off with that whole quantity over quality. So I'm kind of glad that I stopped collecting them when I did. It's a lot of money. And now shit's even more crazy. Like I said, with resellers and sneaker apps and all that shit, I'll get back into buying shoes at some point. Just the ones that I like, as opposed to every fucking one, because I need them all. But my absolute favorite prized possession that is gone because of my active addiction was my 2006 Suzuki GSX 1300R Hayabusa. And this thing, this is one that still hurts me, honestly, because it was all my fault. And, you know, I'm still, we talked about taking responsibility for things earlier. It's still difficult for me at times, man. Sometimes I don't want to take responsibility for things. Sometimes I still want to blame others. But even though there were other people in the situation that hold some accountability, this falls on me. And I don't like that. But I had a beautiful 2006 Hayabusa. I crashed it 6 months after I got it without insurance on it. So I was in the process of rebuilding it with one of my buddies. And it was completely custom. Custom paint, all white pearl with like these ghost spades on it and black spades and pinstriping. And had a 13-inch extended swing arm with custom wheels that were powder coated to match, and a 300 millimeter rear tire, shorty stubby exhaust, light kit through the whole thing. Absolutely incredibly well designed, if I might say so myself. Yes, I designed it, and was being put back together. And then I moved to Vegas without finishing it and left it at somebody else's house, who had contacted me about, you know, potentially getting it back. And I was so off in my addiction, I didn't even respond to him. And so he ended up taking ownership of it and selling it. And do I have a resentment about that? A little bit, yeah. I've already worked through it one time, and at some point I'll probably talk to him about it. But the fact that it was on me, I could have easily done something about it, and I didn't. That one kind of hurts. And the fact that I never got a chance to complete it, I never got a chance to ride it outside of without fairings on it around the block one time when we got the engine finally working. We had the wheels and the struts on it. I mean, yeah, that one sucks. And I miss riding, man. I really enjoyed riding a motorcycle. But I gotta say that everything works out how it's supposed to. And I believe that. And while I would love to have those things, at the end of the day, they are all just things. And I wouldn't change anything on my journey, because I know that everything that occurred led me to this point right here in life. Being an addict in recovery, being a miracle. And stuff can always be purchased again. You know, maybe that bike had to go where it went so that I didn't crash it while I was loaded, or I didn't get arrested going 150 on it with, copious amounts of substances on me. Or maybe all those guns, I had to sell those to supply my habit, so I didn't have one on me the night that I kicked in dude's door with an axe in my hand. You know, all of those things I believe happen for a reason. So I'm very grateful that I'm where I am right now, and I have the opportunity to, at some point, reacquire stuff, because it's just stuff. It's not me. It doesn't matter at the end of the day, like what I'm developing within myself. So my Busa, though. Yeah, definitely my Busa. God, that bike was so nice. Anyway, I digress. Next question says, what has been a change in your life since entering recovery that is the most shocking? And this is cool, because this actually came about. I was having a conversation with another addict about it randomly just popped in. We were talking about strip clubs. And it was so weird, because neither one of us had any desire to go to a strip club. And I got to give some background on this. There was a lot of years of my life that I spent a lot of time in strip clubs. That's just what it was. You go play poker, you go to a strip club and hang out afterwards. There was a time when I was in Las Vegas for the World Series of Poker. I was there for a week. I spent the better part of 4 days straight in a strip club. Why? I don't fucking know. Partially ego shit, partially feeling cool that I had money and was throwing it around. Stuff that for me personally was vibrating on a much lower frequency. Nothing spiritual about that. Nothing positive about that. And I'm not talking shit. If somebody likes going to strip clubs, if you work as an entertainer, cool. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying for me personally, it's interesting because I hadn't even thought about the fact that that doesn't even sound appealing to me anymore. When back in the day, that was appealing as fuck. Going out to the strip club, fuck yeah, let's go hang out with naked chicks, yeah. Maybe I've grown up some. Maybe that's evidence of growth in recovery. And it's weird because then that ties into like not letting ego lead my life. Because there was some element of my life that ego would always be in the driver's seat. Why did I like going to a strip club? Because people paid me attention if I gave them money. So my ego got fluffed, got stroked a little, even though it wasn't legitimate, whatever. In that moment, I felt cool. I felt at home within that level of vibrational frequency. And now within my life, that vibrational frequency has changed. And that has turned into actually looking at what my intention within things is. And I think that's one of the most shocking things is that not only is my life no longer led by ego, but I'm actually looking at what my intention is regarding things. Like looking at having the clarity to ask what my intention is about something. Is it self-serving? Is it ego-driven? Is it character defect-driven? Or is it spiritual? Is it something that is benefiting my life or others' lives that are in my life? It's funny talking about the whole strip club thing. One of the things that I wanted to do for the first 2 years I was in recovery, well, at least the first year and a half, I was determined that I was gonna get in super great shape and I was gonna go perform at a local male strip club we have in Arizona called Dick's Cabaret at an amateur night. And I had it all played out. Like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm literally in the mirror, like, rehearsing my dance moves. If you want to know what my dance moves were, go watch the scene from Magic Mike XXL. The I'ma make you feel it. That whole scene, yeah, I was just going to cut and paste Channing Tatum. Hopefully I looked like, cut and paste Channing Tatum and just do everything he did. That was my entire plan. Literally, my entire plan. Had a couple other little things, but that was my plan. And at that time, I was like, yeah, I want to do this. This is a life goal. This is a life goal. And now I look at that and I say, well, why? Why? Why was that a life goal? Was it because maybe you were operating at a little bit lower vibrational frequency? Maybe you were needing that self-serving, ego-stroking, self-gratification, phrasing. Is that what it was? And now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, that probably was. What benefit is that having in anybody's life? If I go up there and I fucking put on a goddamn banana hammock and shake my bits around, what benefit does that have? What benefit does that have on my spiritual growth? What benefit does that have within my development? Probably not a lot in a positive way. We already talked about my struggles with sex, and if now I'm tying in ego again to this element of sexuality, that's probably not going to be beneficial. So today I can say, I'm not saying that isn't still somewhat of a goal of mine. I'm not saying that it wouldn't be fun to go perform at an amateur night. But I'm saying that now I'm looking at my intention before doing things that in the past I would have been completely led by ego or character defect in general. If that makes sense. Hopefully it does. To me, it makes sense. So hopefully some of that made sense to y'all. So that's what we got for this week's questions of Ask an Addict. If you have any questions that you would like to be answered next episode, make sure to holler at me on any social media. Send your questions over. I love answering questions. And I'm sure I'm going to be talking about what my next favorite kind of snack is or something like that. So thank you for that. All right, it is time for my favorite part of the show. It's not my favorite moment of the week. It's my favorite part of the show called Clean Time Shoutouts. This is the part of the show where we recognize various members who have achieved continuous lengths of recovery milestones. We recognize anybody as a newcomer, which means they have anything 29 days or less clean. We recognize everybody getting 30 days clean, 60 days clean, 90 days clean, 6 months clean, 9 months clean, 1 whole year clean, 18 months clean, or multiple years clean. But we also like to give recognition for if you hit any whole big number. So you get 100 days, you get 1,000 days, you get 10,000 days, whatever it is. If you're celebrating a milestone between now and next week, make sure to send it over to me so I can get hype and I can give these Clean Time shoutouts because I love giving Clean Time shoutouts. We got a bunch of them today. So y'all know, don't be scared when you hear them boops. That's what we do for each year clean, just so you know. But let's get to it. We've got a bunch of newcomers. The most important person ever within recovery is the newcomer. And this is anybody with 29 days or less. First off, from Twitter, we've got Zoe C as a newcomer. Welcome. Stay. Next up from Twitter, as a newcomer, we've got Kara. Well done. Welcome. Stay. Next up as a newcomer, we've got Joey A. Great job, man. Glad you're back, brother. Just stay. And next up from Twitter as a newcomer, we've got Cheza. Well done. Welcome. Stay. And finally, as a newcomer, we've got Sophie. Welcome back. Just stay. Actually, I lied. We got one more, too. From Twitter, we've got Alco G. Welcome. Stay. Next up, with 30 days clean, we've got Alia from Twitter. Congratulations. If y'all remember, 30 days ago, we gave her a shout out as a newcomer on this podcast. Next up from Twitter with 30 days as well, we've got Sally. Well done. Next with 90 days clean from Twitter, we've got Samantha. Hell yeah. Next up with 100 days clean from Twitter, we've got Summer. Triple digits, y'all. Hell yeah. Next with 6 months clean, we've got Marcus. Good job. Half of a boop. Hell yeah. And next up with 1 year clean from Twitter, we've got Claire. Boop. Well done. And with 2 years clean from Twitter, we've got Amy A. Boop, boop. Well done. Then with 1,000 days clean from Twitter, comes out to 2.7 years, we've got Hannah G. Boop, boop. And like a 3/4 boop. There you go. And next up, we going out to Vegas for my man Michael O. with 4 years clean. Boop, 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 boop. Well done. Next up, we're going back to Twitter for Brian K. with 9 years clean. Boop, 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 boop. And finally, with 14 years clean, we've got Cassandra R. Boop, 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 boop. Finish it off there, y'all. Hell yeah. Well done, everybody. Congratulations to everybody who celebrated Clean Time today. If you didn't celebrate Clean Time today, guess what? Don't use and you will. That is literally how this works. Remember, every single day clean is a successful day.
That part. That part, that part, that part, that part.
Well, y'all, we are officially just about out of time, but I want to give a huge thank you again to everybody for being here. Episode 33, y'all. Hopefully you enjoyed what we covered today. Hopefully you'll be back next week. Hopefully you heard something you liked and you shared. Thank you, everybody out there, for all of your continued support. Another huge thank you to Alice in Wonderland, Valentino Khan, and Mad Decent Records for this amazing song in my ears right now as our theme music on the Clean and Filthy podcast. Thank you to our VIP supporters for your continued support. Thank you, everybody out there, for downloading, liking, commenting, subscribing, positive feedback, constructive criticism. I appreciate it all. Nobody's told you today that they love you. I love each and every one of you, and I thank you for being a part of my recovery and my life. I will see y'all next week, 5 p.m.
I just wanna